According to Growing Success, the primary purpose of assessment and evaluation is to improve student learning, where assessments provide students with multiple opportunities to demonstrate their learning or see feedback in support of their learning, and evaluation provides students with a measurement of this learning near the end of the process, which they can then use to see where they need to improve, where they succeeded, as well as allowing their parents and the teacher to use this as a means to improve their learning as well. One of the key principles of assessment and evaluation, according to Growing Success, is assessment should be varied and differentiated in a way so that all students can demonstrate their learning. For instance, a student suffering from high anxiety may not do well in a presentation format, but they may do better if they can videotape themselves on their own. Another is it is essential for feedback to be clear, specific, descriptive, timely, and ongoing, because effectively vague feedback provides no guidance, and without it being given in a timely manner, they don't have enough time to act upon it. Another is there should be various opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning throughout the learning process, which you can collect and provide feedback for along the way. Without this significant evidence of learning and chances for feedback, students will not be prepared for summative evaluations come the end of the learning period. Another is instruction and tasks should be designed to reflect the students, both in their interests and their preferred learning styles. This is incredibly important for keeping students engaged and motivated throughout your instruction, as if you strictly read off of a book made 100 years ago, I'm sure they're not going to be very interested. Whereas if you keep it relevant and use modalities that are common to their age group and contemporary society, you'll keep them engaged and motivated for a lot longer. And finally, the learning skills must be assessed completely separate from the student's achievement of the curriculum expectations. This is vital to unbiased assessment of their achievement in the actual course content, and it allows you to give them specific feedback on how they're behaving in the class. Assessment and evaluation refers specifically to the way in which a task or an event is used by the teacher. So assessment is the process of receiving information about student achievement to inform future instruction and provide students with descriptive and timely feedback that occurs during the learning process. Whereas evaluation then refers to the process of receiving information regarding a student's achievement with the intent of judging and then assigning a value to represent that level of achievement, which typically occurs at or near the end of the learning process. Like assessment and evaluation discussed earlier, assessment of, for, and as learning have many similar characteristics in regards to their uses for measuring student achievement. This is also, however, how they are different. Rather than focusing on how the task will be used, assessment of, for, and as learning are used in the context of supporting student learning throughout the learning process, with emphasis on supporting the student and the learning process itself. Therefore, assessment for learning refers to the earlier used terminology formative assessment, where activities and tasks are used specifically for students to learn, meaning without a mark or a judgment for achievement against the learning goals. This can be student to student and student to teacher. Assessment as learning is in its most basic form student to self, and therefore manifests in typically student self-assessment activities. This helps students become more involved in assessment and evaluation practices, allowing them to be more aware of expectations through tracking their own learning and their own levels of achievement, which additionally can aid in motivation and higher achievement levels when students realize that they have an influence on their own learning. as learning then is a subpart of for learning and the way that it supports the student's learning. Effectively then, by process of elimination, assessment of learning is the measurement of student achievement, much like the earlier used terminology, summative assessment. Although this gives off connotations of an end to the learning, assessments of learning can be used to inform students on their successes and pitfalls of the learning period, and then they can use this to further their learning afterwards. So this kind of takes the whole step-by-step process of for, as, and of learning and brings it around again. A prime example of formative assessment I've used most frequently has been instructional questioning. Instructional questioning, although eliciting little data, is typically overlooked as a means to assessment for learning. However, through instructional questioning, I've been able to, in a timely fashion, receive information regarding the student's knowledge and understanding against the learning goals, and then immediately provide them with descriptive and specific feedback, which is effectively differentiated for each student individually. A great example of assessment as learning is student tracking logs. By having the students track their own learning, they become more aware of the assessment and evaluation process, which is an overt way of teaching and getting students to be involved in self-assessment and assess their level of achievement against the learning goals. I've been able to push this one step further and add a section for students to note their successes and failures on this assessment, which I usually have them synthesize my own written feedback as an example to begin with, and then from then on have them write their own. An assessment of learning that I've done is typically in the form of an artwork, or in other words, a performance task, where the assessment of learning is typically best when they are provided with specific and descriptive feedback on the learning target and task, which usually manifests in a rubric with descriptors that are clearly indicating specific levels of achievement of the learning goals in different strands of the achievement chart. Of course, rubrics come paired with assessment tasks, which, when paired with instruction that teach the learning goals adequately, and students have had multiple assessment for and as learning opportunities before the summative assessment, results in a very fair and valid assessment of learning. As touched upon earlier, effective formative feedback is specific, descriptive, and timely. Specific and descriptive feedback addresses precisely which aspects of a topic or unit the student needs to focus on, as well as those they have excelled in. In comparison, vague and nondescript feedback is ineffective and practically useless, as it does not provide the student with this individualized instruction to further their learning. A quick turnaround time for feedback is also essential for students to act upon your specific and descriptive feedback. This means feedback on assessments and evaluations weeks after administering the task is useless, that is, it is likely you have already moved on past the material at hand. In this case, if time is ever an issue, I would consider implementing self or peer formative assessments to allow for short or possibly even immediate feedback time, as you are not involved in the process and you have many helpers to do the process for you. However, this is not to say that this is what you must do all the time. Teacher feedback is essential for learning. Without the learning skills, I believe you would have many teachers taking the learning skills qualities into consideration when determining a student's achievement of the curriculum expectations, which arguably I would believe still is of concern, even though we assess them entirely separately. Nonetheless, though, their importance is commonly overlooked, even though they are vital in communicating to various stakeholders, such as parents, employers, post-secondary institutions, and so on, the behavioral qualities of the student. As such, they need to be tracked and reported with equal weighting to the student's achievement of the curriculum expectations. Assessing and tracking them can then be done using the same assessment tools used for the course material. Students can be provided with expectations to inform them of how you will be assessing their learning skills and work habits, and can be tracked and recorded on an ongoing or frequent basis using a tracking sheet or recording system, like the one used for your assessment or evaluation tasks. Obviously, with minor adjustments to reflect the levels outlined by growing success. The needs improvement, satisfactory, good, and excellent.